Have you ever watched a painting video thinking that you could follow along, only to realize that it suddenly skipped to the end? And then you had no idea what happened in between, like, huh? That was me when I first started painting and watched tutorials on YouTube. And I wish there were places where you could watch the entire process. And there are. And today's video is going to be one of them. Hello, my name is Evil and I like to make painting videos. So in today's video I'm going to walk you through how I paint mushrooms with watercolors, which is part of a challenge that I am taking part on Instagram, which is the Fall Fungi Madness 2025. Now, I'm sorry actually for the background, but I am at the moment painting at my dining table because I cannot use my desk, and that's why I add this ugly stained sort of paper to protect my table from staining from the colors that I'll be using. So there were 4 weeks of painting mushrooms in this Fall Fungi Madness challenge. I've already painted 1, 2 and 3 weeks, so today I will be doing the 4th. And I've already made a pre-sketch, so let's get started. For today's video, it is going to be the full process. Of course, I did cut some parts out where my hand was cut in the camera to reach for paint or for water. I did speed it up a little bit though, but you can slow it down if you would like to paint at your own pace. I've also linked my materials down in the description below, and you can do your mushroom sketches based on the names here because I've already pre-sketched them, or you can pause the video right now and make a screenshot and use this as your base. Quick note, you do not have to have the materials that I have and that I am using here. Please use what watercolor material you already have on hand and experiment with them. So I start by wetting the cap of the mushroom. For this saffron milk cap, I lay down a really faint wash of pink, because if you look at the reference photos, you'll notice that they're not just orange, they often also have a subtle pink color in them. And after that, I layer some orange for the shadows. I follow the same approach with the stem, though sometimes I switch up and use wet on dry. It doesn't really make a big difference. The reason why I stick to wet on wet for the cap is just that it gives me a nice blend and makes it easier for me to control highlights and shadows. And I follow the same thing for the ugly milk cap here. I wet the cap, I drop in the color, and just let the wet on wet technique do the work for me. So here practically I moved on to the ugly milk cap because I wait on the saffron milk cap to dry. Of course you can work mushroom per mushroom if you would like to. I just go back and forth between the mushrooms. And then here my ugly milk cap has dried, so I go back to the saffron milk cap. Then once the saffron milk cap is dry, I go back in to add details. The base layers are always very light, lots of water, very little pigment, but as I build up layers, I gradually increase the paint to water ratio. So here I add a bit more paint compared to water. Here my first layer after the wash was just a bit more pigments. At this stage you can either start adding shadows too, or like I did here, just jump straight into the details. Once that layer dries, you can keep building, adding more pigment each time into your mix and adding more the details or re-enhancing the details that are there. And the more layers you add, the richer and more saturated colors should look like if you add more pigments rather than water into your mix. Now for the stem, I'm not fully detailing it yet, but I am adding more color. I deepen the shadows right under the cap and also at the very bottom where the stem is in the ground. And then moving back to the cap of the mushroom itself, if you look at reference images, you'll notice that there are fine lines and little dash-like textures around the surface of this mushroom. And that's what I'm trying to capture here, along with the mushroom's natural curve, let's say. And instead of drawing a perfect straight lines, I use more angled dashes that follow the shape of the cap. So on the left side, for example, the dashes angle down toward the bottom right, and on the right side they angle toward the bottom left. And this creates a kind of a sense of movement toward the center of the cap, like not the center but what you just see there, to empathize and highlight the fact that it is the blobby shape of the mushroom right there. And of course you can also use continuous lines or some sort of parenthesis lines if that works better for your style or if you would just like to do so. I actually wanted to show you a reference image side by side with this painting, but unfortunately I couldn't find any copyright-free images to use, and I don't want to risk my video getting taken down for a copyrighted mushroom photo. So yeah, let's move on to the stem. Here I focus on emphasizing the shadow right under the cap, and then I gently drag some of that color downward onto the stem, but I don't paint the stem fully though. And then at the very bottom I use a stronger mix, so a mix with more pigment to suggest that earthy texture that you see when a mushroom is plucked. Is it called plucked? Right from the ground, so pulled out of the ground. And usually you'd expect to see brown or gray colors here, saying, dirt or stones, but I just like to stay with the color of the mushroom. And of course you can decide to use different colors here if you would like to, but I just decided to stick with the color of the mushroom itself. For the ugly milk cap, funny name by the way, I start by adding some colors along the curve of the mushroom, so not the curve but like next to that little hollow center of the mushroom, and then I softly blend that color with clear water, but not fully onto the mushroom, just a little bit until the mid part of the mushroom. And then at the very edges I use a very heavy mix of brown, use as sort of shadow, and all of this sort of helps the lighter parts to stand out and makes the overall curve of the mushroom more noticeable. And for the stem, the process is almost identical, or actually identical, to the saffron milk cap. So I go directly in with paint, or you can also do wet on wet. And since we didn't cover the whole cap with clear water when we were doing the cap of this ugly milk cap mushroom, that's a lot of cap in one sentence, I can directly go in and paint because the part that's next to it is dry. And then I just emphasize the shadow under the cap as well as what's supposed to stick in the ground. And then we can move on to the next mushroom, which is the 20 milk cap. So I think from here on the process is pretty much the same. Hopefully by now you've got a good feel of how I'm trying to paint the mushrooms. So until we reach the detailing stage, I will let some calming music go on, and yeah, just let the painting go. Anyways, see you there. So I do have to apologize here, my phone ran out of storage and I didn't realize it. That means part of the indigo milk-cap mushroom didn't get filmed, but don't worry, later on during the detailing stage you'll see how it turned out, so if you'd like you can even replicate it yourself. Now let's move on to the detailing. For this I use colored pencils and I just pick whatever I have nearby. No specific kind of colored pencils. And when it comes to choosing colors, I don't limit myself to what's accurate to the mushroom. So for example, with the saffron milk cap mushroom, I didn't stick strictly to, let's say, orange or brown. Instead, I just picked colors that kind of felt right for the vibe. And honestly, even looking at it right now, doing a voiceover, I think a red colored pencil would also have look interesting here, and maybe for the bottom even something more burgundy-ish. One thing I don't do though is fully outlining the mushroom. Instead I only add like outlines in certain places, like where the cap meets the stem for example, or anywhere where shadows would naturally fall. That's where I press a little bit harder with the colored pencil so it looks richer and creamier. And also sometimes just for fun and for stylization, I like to break the lines a little bit. So what I do is I add a line and then I add two little dashes and then I add another line. It's, you know, it's nothing fancy and it doesn't really like fully have a meaning like a shadow or a highlight, but I find that it adds a little bit of an interest and stylization to something that I try to paint. We're already around the end of this painting video. I really hope it was helpful if you painted along, and even if you just watched I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for staying until the end. It honestly means a lot to me, and your support really keeps me on going. I guess I'll see you again in my next video next week. Until then, take care and stay creative. Bye bye!